Okay. Well,
Get the main guy over here.
this is House File 682, and this is our congressional and legislative reapportionment. Iowa is one of the first states in the country to reach agreement on this. The bill passed by overwhelming margins in both the House and the Senate. It is truly a nonpartisan approach. It's a system that we devised after the turmoil we had back in the 60s and 70s that many of you remember. I know that Senator Kibbe remembers. And I do too. In one sense, I was kind of a beneficiary of the fact that the Democratic Party and the League of Women Voters challenged the legislative reapportionment plan in '72, that it didn't have, it had too wide a variance and protected the incumbents, and the Iowa Supreme Court threw it out, redrew the map, and lo and behold, 72 miles of Minnesota border without an incumbent. And that's the district that I ran and won in '72, and 10 years later, I had the honor to be elected governor. But in the intervening time in 1980, before the reapportionment in 1980, we worked to come up with this approach where the Legislative Service Bureau would develop the plans, and then those could not be amended. If the first plan was rejected, then the second plan would be developed. And again, I guess the third plan then could be subject to amendments, but I guess the first year, 80, we got to the third plan that was never amended. And since then, we've either accepted the first plan or the second plan. This is the first plan. And I think the congressional variance is probably as small as it's ever been for the congressional districts. Although I'd say, kiddingly, this is probably good for the real estate business because at least a couple congressmen are moving, and I think some legislators that may as well. But all kidding aside, I do think that we can have some pride in the fact that Iowa has a system for reapportionment that is fair and really gives the people an opportunity to choose their congressmen and their representatives and senators in a competitive system that isn't really designed to skew it in favor of one party or the other. And so I think that's a good system, and it's something that you all can be proud of. And so I'm pleased to sign this bill. Give the draft of the first bill.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you handle the bill in the House. You handle it on the Senate side.
Governor and the staff upstairs are working on it like a couple of minutes.
You bet. We'll do that. You want to take those? Anybody else would like to hand?
After your house.
Okay, there you go. Okay, you like a couple? Okay. Here we go. A couple more. Okay. Okay. We have. You have one. Here, Representing Massey, would you like one? Okay, okay, okay.
So the moving trucks will all get loaded up here.
Well, I'll tell you you what Congressman Loebsack told me. He's gonna ask Congressman Braley to move it.
Oh, don't.
That was pretty cute.
Governor, just suggest maybe next time the staff can check the pins and find one that works right off the bat.
Yeah. Yeah, they should test those. Okay, have any questions?
Is there ever any regret among Iowa's political leaders that they give up the power to draw these maps into their partisan favor?
Well, I think the system has worked. And I suppose there's always those that say, oh boy, we could get advantage if we did it this way. But you know, my sense is this. Iowa voters are very independent, it's a very competitive state. And people tend to vote for the individual. And so the quality of the candidate is the most important. And so the quality of candidate and how hard they're willing to work is what I figure usually decides elections. And I've always said the harder you work, the luckier you get in politics. And I think that's a very important thing. So, and I really think, and those of us, Senator Kibbe and I have both been around a long time in Iowa politics, and we've seen it swing back and forth. We've seen either party in control, and a lot of it's got to do with sometimes the economy and issues, but the quality of candidates is always a very important factor. And I think that's more important than the districts, and the districts are going to change as the population changes.
How does redistricting in Iowa affect Iowa politics?
Well, actually, I think it's beneficial in that you usually have competitive districts, and if you look around the rest of the country, there are very few competitive congressional districts in the United States. And there are a lot of people that think the extreme partisanship we see at the national level is somewhat caused by the partisan reapportionment that goes on in a lot, especially big states. You know, and so you got one party that dominates, and basically they do everything they can to try to put the other one out of business. And consequently, I think that tends to make things more partisan and skews it. In Iowa, literally, I think all four of the congressional districts are competitive in this state. And most of the legislative districts are competitive. With the right candidate, 75% of the districts, I think, could go either way. And I let the legislators comment on this too. That's the way I kind of analyze it and view it. So it really comes down to, and I think as the legislators look at this plan, and it's not perfect, and if you live in Council Bluffs, you don't like getting thrown in with Des Moines, I understand that. But somebody's got to be thrown in with Des Moines, that's it.
It's Iowa's term limit bill.
How do you think Christie Millsap would fare as a candidate against any of our incumbent members?
Well, I think in southeast Iowa, she would be a pretty formidable candidate where she grew up. I think in northwest Iowa, she'd be a fish out of water.
Because it's largely Republican, or?
Well, she's never lived in northwest Iowa, and it's a heavily Republican area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.